We got the details for Strand yesterday, and today we're getting all the ways that other subclasses aside from Strand are being adjusted a little bit. So going into the thing, basically a lot of Arc 3.0 stuff. So for Lightfall, they're looking at making the following changes focused on passive cooldown gains. So they rescaled the efficacy of Discipline, Strength, and each class ability stat on Grenade, Melee, and class ability regen rates. In general, the regeneration provided by a tier 10 stat will now roughly equivalent to a tier 8 in the previous system. However, each tier stat now provides a more consistent gain in cooldown and reduction rather than spikingly heavier at lower rates. Basically, let's say you somehow manage 0 discipline, or below 10 discipline. If it was a 2-minute recharge, a next tier up would give you minus 5 seconds, a next tier up would give you minus 6, next tier up would give you like minus 8, and then eventually the tiers up would go like minus 12, minus 15, minus 30 seconds in the cooldowns and that sort of thing. This way, it'll be a lot more static, so it'll be like each tier would give you 4 seconds off, making it so that even at tier 10, it would only be 40 seconds off as opposed to 2.5 minutes off at the high tier, to simplify the way that works. Now, starting in Lightfall, of course, mod element alignments will be gone, which means that at any time, they're actually adding this because there's going to be a lot more ways to earn energy. All of the mods that was earn energy in some form of way, or make orbs of light based on these things, a lot of those things, including Bomber, Outreach, Impact, here, actually, let me go one by one if I can remember them off the top of my head. Bomber for grenade energy on class ability, Outreach for melee energy on class ability, Impact Induction for grenade energy on melee hits, Utility Kickstart, which is just a refresh on utility, same with melee grenade kickstart. Invigoration, which if I recall is melee energy on orb pickup. Installation is class ability on orb pickup, and Innervation is grenade on orb pickup. Then Hands-On is super from melees, Ash's Assets is super energy from grenades, Dynamo is super energy from class ability. All of those could be equipped more than once and multiple times, and mix-matched on any armor. So that does make sense that they're adjusting how much discipline, strength, and discipline, strength, and resilience. Actually, now that I realize it, there is a mix of how much those do benefit each other, just because of they won't be as beneficial in the long run naturally, but you'll have many odds or different ways to build into those abilities. So they also mentioned again that the armor energy costs have been removed off the board. Artifact mods are no longer needed in your armor specifically, giving you more space for build crafting, so that hopefully will make it a way to allow more energy freely, as opposed to needing to build into triple 100s all the time. And oddly enough, they're actually reverting a cooldown. Because of the changes, they're changing back a dodge class ability implemented in the last hotfix. So now the Gambler's Dodge and Marksman Dodge are returned to their respective times, Gambler's being at 38 seconds and Marksman Dodge being at 29-second cooldown, to revert back then. So, as well, they're doing some adjustments to roaming supers. So generally, they actually adjusted orb creation, making it so that they increase the maximum number of orbs of power that roaming supers, meaning like Arc Staff, Night Stalker? No, what's the Spectral Blades? Hammers, Fist of Havoc, that sort of thing. They could create now 7 orbs, and the one-off supers like Nova Bomb, Shadow Shot, Golden Gun, Golden Gun's not that, Blade Barrage. The maximum of orbs are now down to 5. Again, now the orb generation from Well of Radiance, Ward of Dawn, and Shadow Shot variants are unchanged, however. But to also improve something, Hammer Soul, Daybreak, and Spectral Blades cooldowns, some of the least used roaming supers, let me say, except for maybe hammers, but the cooldown has been reduced more by a minute, from 10 minutes and 25 seconds naturally to 9 minutes 16 seconds. So that's good. Now, some changes, because you guys have been abusing the hell out of Ward of Dawn in all the objective game modes. They are making mainly PvE changes to Ward of Dawn. Here, let me say that this way. The maximum health is reduced from 13,500 to 8,000. Now, the damage dealt to the ward by PvE combatants has been reduced to compensate. In general, Ward of Dawn's health and PvE should not meaningfully change. So while it does have less health, PvE enemies don't do as much damage to it, so hopefully it means that Ward of Dawn's and Crucible will have, way less resistance. And they also standardized the damage done by weapons to the ward itself. Previously, energy weapons did 2.5 times bonus damage, and kinetic weapons did standard damage. Now, regardless of the damage type, all weapons will do 1.5 times damage to the ward itself. Armor of Light has been updated to reduce its potency to PvP. Its now maximum health is reduced by 125 points. It inherits Void's Overshield's 50% PvE damage resistance to compensate, and no longer negates precision damage, also in Crucible. Thunder Crash is a little bit of a OP thing for high-end Crucible, so they're reducing the maximum flight time from 5 seconds to 4.5 seconds, reducing the size of the damage volume around the player when in flight, making it so that it's harder to fly into people and disintegrate them without doing it, more intentionally. The descent now begins earlier in flight, so you won't be able to fly as long, reducing landing detonation size versus players by 20%, so it's harder to catch more people, let's say. Unchanged versus PvE targets, and Fist of Havoc has gotten a buff, so it now has increased PvE damage by 20%. I'm sorry to say, that's probably not enough to make it like over Thunder Crash, considering there's not enough potency with the roaming bit to actually make us want to use for that. It's not the damage that's behind, it's how long we can use it. Now, they are also adjusting Spark of Resistance. It was in every player's Arc 3.0 build, so we shouldn't be surprised it's getting a little bit of a change. They now improved the amount of people required to proc it, so you now need 2 combatants in close proximity as opposed to 3. And they reduced the linger time until you're no longer surrounded from 4 seconds to 2. So it's not as active as often, but it is still the same buff. So let's see how that goes. They also adjusted Daybreak because it was really feeling like it was lacking. Now you can swing more, and the PvE damage is increased by 25% overall, which I actually do like, because I was trying to use Dawnblade on my Solar subclasses, for my Warlock, and it was really feeling pitiful. Now, Phoenix Dive has also been reworked since it's a class item as opposed to just a thing you can do. Base cooldown is reduced from 80 seconds to 55. While Heat Rise is active, the restoration is increased from 1 second to 3 seconds. While Daybreak is active, the cooldown is significantly reduced, allowing for rapid reactivations, like before. And while Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive's detonation maximum damage is more than doubled. So, let's hope that works. Now, here's something actually very, very cool. And I'm going to read this word for word. Guardians are getting a little sturdier. Starting in Lightfall, physics collision damage will no longer be lethal to Guardians. Fall damage should still be lethal when Lightfall launches, but we do plan to make that non-lethal in a mid-season update. You'll still take damage from physical delections, but generally leave you one shot instead of outright splattering you. So, thank God. The amount of times I just got... You know what? That ruined Eager Edge, what's it called? That almost ruined Eager Edge griefing, too, because now people, unless they're thrown off edges, will just be fine. So, yeah. Screw you to all the people that Eager Edge griefed. Now, here are some changes to Fragments coming up. So, as you know, we're getting a rework to Elemental Wells, that every class is going to have its unique kind of Elemental Wells. So, let's go about them. So, a new fragment for the Arc subclasses, Spark of Instinct. When critically wounded, taking damage from nearby enemies emits a burst of damaging arc energy that jolts targets, basically radiant, not radiant light, reactive pulse, but intrinsically. You also have Spark of Haste, where you have greatly increased resilience, recovery, and mobility while sprinting. We'll see that a lot in the Crucible, I imagine. For Solar classes, because we now have Fire Sprites, which is basically a new Elemental Well thing. Let's see. Fire Sprites are created by a suite of new and existing Solar fragments and grant grenade energy on pickup. The new Ember of Mercy. When you revive an ally, you and your nearby allies gain restoration. Picking up a Fire Sprite also grants restoration. Let me say it again. Restoration. Ember of Resolve is another new one where Solar Grenade Final Blows will cure you. Reworking to Ember of Tempering will now create a Fire Sprite on Solar Weapon kills while it's active in addition to its original effects of regeneration. Ember of Combustion now creates a Fire Sprite on Solar Super Defeats in addition to its original effects. And Ember of Searing will now create a Fire Sprite when defeating Scorched targets in addition to its original effects. So basically, they just adjusted ways that old fragments can create Fire Sprites. So that's great. Because I think I run 2 of these at least. For Void, they added the Void Breaches, which is the new Void Elemental Well. Created by a selection of new and existing Void fragments. Grant class ability energy on pickup, specifically. Wait, is that... Okay. So, Solar, okay, that makes sense now when I read it, because Solar is typically grenades, Arc is typically melee, and Void is typically class energy, so that works. So, but, Echo of Cessation. Finisher Final Blows create a burst of Void damage that causes nearby enemies to become volatile. Defeating volatile targets creates a Nova Breach. Echo of Vigilance, a new one. Defeating a target when your shields are depleted grants you a temporary Void Overshield. Ew. Echo of Domineering now creates a Void Breach when defeating suppressed targets in addition to original effects. Echo of Harvest now creates a Void Breach when defeating weakened targets with precision damage in addition to its original effects. And Echo of Starvation now grants Devour on picking up a Void Breach in addition to original effects, which if I recall is granting Devour on Ord pickup as well. Now, that is a majority of the changes we are told. I don't know if this is everything or what they just wanted to say, but that was also in line with the Buildcraft update, where every class has unique elemental wells based on the subclass, and subclasses are also getting access to way more anti-barrier options. In case you don't remember that or have not seen that video, check that article, read it up on yourself. I guarantee people will find something to like in there. With that, my name is Matt Scorpion. I will see you in the next video.